I promised my partners in development that I would say a few words about the Meridians Endowment Campaign, because they are as excited as we are that this is our 25th anniversary, that we have achieved this milestone, a quarter of a century. And we are also celebrating the endowment campaign. When Smith decided to make Meridians a fundraising priority, it was making a powerful statement about its values and priorities by creating and funding a space where the voices and intellect of women, and particularly women of color scholars and artists, could have a space and a voice of their own. As President Simmons' quote that we use in all of our promotional materials, you'll see it everywhere this weekend, so wonderfully affirmed for us. We are inspired and motivated by the enthusiasm of the Smith community who are learning about our work and becoming a part of the Meridians community. We strive to make our Meridians philanthropy as joyful, inclusive, and as democratic as possible, which reflects the Meridians ethos. I am delighted to share that because of that generosity, we have succeeded in raising more than half of our $2.5 million goal. As of today, we're at almost $1.5 million. And something especially exceptional about that is that gifts of any size are being counted towards this endowment. That is uncommon in our philanthropic history. That literally means a $5 gift, a $25 gift, a $100 gift. Does as much, honestly, because so often it means so much more to the person giving it, right, to donate that. And I have been especially pleased to receive emails and letters from development telling me that a former student of mine gave what she could to contribute to that endowment. It really is, it moves me almost to tears, but I'll spare you my llorona's, face. Let's see, is joy to share? Okay, please join me. Okay. Right, okay. It is a joy to share the Meridians mission and to experience the pride alums feel in learning about this journal, to feel the validation of our mission, and to know that our global feminist community is growing, and for Meridians to now be a permanent part of Smith's institutional infrastructure. That is what the endowment has allowed, by the way, is that we are now, for the first time in the journal's history, part of the college's operating budget. We are no longer subject to discretionary funding. And I am going to take a minute also to thank Denise McCann, who is the current Associate Provost and who really played an important behind-the-scenes role in making that happen. So can we all please give Denise? It's why I sat you there, Denise, so I could point at you. You all are, most of you are affiliated with academic institutions. You know how hard this is to do, right? And so when you have people pulling for what you're doing on the inside and who can see the vision and are doing what they can to make it happen, you really have to take a minute and give them their credit. So please join us in celebrating Meridian's next chapter, our next quarter of a century. Help us spread the word and advance our ambitious $2.5 million goal. Imagine how you can support Meridians. Sign up for our newsletter. That's an easy one, right? You'll get monthly blasts from us, sometimes mid-month, thanks to Alex, who's really got this down to a beautiful design science. And we'll be telling you what we're doing with that money that we're raising and the support we're getting from Smith College. This is the one time I'm going to tell you to pull out your phones. Follow us on social media. Our student intern team is really active promoting us on Media Monday, Poetry Tuesday, Women of Color Wednesday. Don't you want a Women of Color Wednesday? I know you do, right? Throwback Thursday and Feminism Fridays. It's what we need in these times. And everything you see posted will be a reflection of our student intern team's work. And we'll be showcasing and highlighting what we've been doing in Meridians and what we have coming ahead. Okay, so sign up. Twitter, no, not Twitter, we got rid of them. Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're on all those. So, it's your daily dose of feminist women of color joy. You can have it in your inbox, okay? Follow us, come visit us when you're on campus, 22 Green Street. We have, again, as a product of this work, this fundraising was actually the very first manifestation of what that lead gift gave to us, which was this beautiful new space at 22 Green Street. And spread the word about Meridians to your local Smith Club. And if you teach, Go look at our catalog. We have 25 years of brilliance in one place. You can read the catalog on our website. Use it in your classes, cite it in your work, right? Cite Black women, cite women of color, cite African women whose work we are publishing. That's how we grow this project. That's how we do our little bit to fight the power. I'm a no public enemy, girls, okay? All right, so all of this to say is that I hope you'll not only continue to be a part of the Meridians community and help us keep protecting and uplifting this Smith jewel, but that you will become an ambassador and spread the word. All right, thank you. On that note, I am now going to formally open this evening's signature event, a keynote roundtable conversation moderated by our Provost on the significance of the Meridians Project at Smith and beyond. So I'll be introducing our speakers tonight one by one. And let me make sure I have my marching orders here. Okay. So it is my pleasure to introduce first our moderator, Provost and Professor of Africana Studies, Daphne Lamothe. Daphne Lamothe is Smith's Chief Academic Officer, responsible for curriculum and for faculty teaching and research support. She plays a pivotal role in achieving Smith's institutional goals through stewardship of the college's academic mission. Academic and co-curricular units within the Provost portfolio include all academic departments, as well as the libraries, the Museum of Art, the Botanic Garden, institutional research, the Office of the Registrar, the Office for the Arts, and Meridians. Professor Lamothe also chairs the Committee on Academic Priorities and oversees the long-term composition of the faculty. She has been at Smith since 2004 and has served as the chair of the Department of Africana Studies, co-chair of the Admission Policy Study Group, and served on the Academic Priorities and Faculty Compensation and Development Committees. In 2023, she received the Honored Professor Award for her achievements in teaching and scholarship and her contributions to the academic community. Professor Lamothe holds a bachelor's degree in English literature from Yale University and a PhD in English from the University of California at Berkeley. It is also my great honor and pleasure to introduce Paula Giddings. Paula Giddings is Elizabeth A. Woodson 1922 Professor Emerita of Africana Studies. She is the author of 3 books. Her book, Ida, A Sword Among Lions, was awarded the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Biography. And I'm going to go off script to tell you that if you have not read this book yet, you must read this book. It is an exemplar of historical biography. And I'm pleased to say that the first iteration of that book was published in Meridians, Volume 1, okay? A short article about Ida. So this is one of the things we do. That's how we got Paula to do this work of editor. Giddings was also the editor of Burning All Illusions, an anthology of articles on race published by The Nation magazine from 1867 to 2000. She joined the Smith College faculty as Professor of Africana Studies in 2001 and served as the editor of Meridians from 2005 to 2017. It's truly my pleasure to welcome her. Also with us this evening is President Sarah Willie-LeBreton. Dr. Sarah Willie-LeBreton is the 12th president of Smith College. She earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Haverford College in 1986 and a master's in 1988, PhD in 1995 from Northwestern University, all in sociology. That's right, sociology. After having taught at Colby College and Bard College in tenure-track appointments, she was tenured at Swarthmore, where she served as coordinator of the Black Studies program and chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology for a total of 17 years. She was appointed as Provost and Dean of the Faculty at Swarthmore in 2018 and served in that role until 2023 when we stole her away. She currently serves on the boards of the Grand Canyon Conservancy, the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities in Massachusetts, and the Consortium on Financing Higher Education. Thank you for joining us, Erin. And last but most certainly not least, President Emerita Ruth J. Simmons. Dr. Simmons served in various faculty and administrative roles, has served in various faculty and administrative roles at the University of Southern California, Princeton University, and Spelman College before becoming the president of Smith College, the largest women's college in the United States from 1995 to 2001. At Smith, she launched a number of important academic initiatives, including an engineering program, the first at an American women's college, the Poetry Center, and founding of the journal Meridians, Feminism, Race, Transnationalism, which published its first issue in the fall of 2000. Dr. Simmons left Smith to become the president of Brown University from 2001 to 2012, where she was the first Black woman to head an Ivy League institution. And finally, because of a last-minute cancellation by our other highly esteemed editor emerita, Kumkum Bhavnani, who was not able to join us, unfortunately, I will be stepping into the fifth chair there to join the conversation moderated by former Editorial Advisory Board and Creative Writing Advisory Board member, Professor Lamothe. My bio is in the program. I've told you who I am already, so thank you, and I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Thank you so much, Ginetta. And first, I want to say that I am so honored to be in the company of these amazing, brilliant women. As we celebrate and commemorate the 25th anniversary of Meridians and its founding, we have the wonderful opportunity to reflect on Meridian's past, its present, and if we have time, maybe its future here at Smith. So as Ginetta just shared with everyone here, and you've all heard, Meridians was conceptualized during, and some might say it was even inspired by President Simmons' tenure. With her enthusiastic support, the journal was formally inaugurated with the publication of its first volume in the fall of 2000. Now, this was a significant occurrence because at the time, most, if not all, scholarly journals were based at R1s, research-focused universities, and so the very idea of establishing, housing, and operating a scholarly journal at a small liberal arts women's college was anomalous, to say the least. I would say that's an understatement. In addition, Meridian's explicit focus on feminism, race, transnationalism, and its centering of women of color, feminist knowledge production, and producers was not only innovative, it directly challenged the status quo, even within women's studies. As if that wasn't enough, the Smith faculty who brought this proposal to President Simmons, Susan Van Dyne, Nancy Saporta Sternbach, Elizabeth Alexander, Ann Jones, and Ravina Agarwal also proposed editing the first issue as a collective, which was an exemplary feminist ethic and therefore an uncommon approach in the world of scholarly journal publishing. So my first question is for President Simmons, and what I want to ask you is, what inspired you to say yes to this proposal?
Well, I want to be behave myself tonight.
Don't do it.
And I promise I'll get to that. But I do want to start by saying how really extraordinarily euphoric I am to be in this room. To know that the work done by so many brilliant, devoted scholars committed to this ideal made all the difference in the world, because a quarter century later, it's still here, doing brave, beautiful work. And so I am heartened by that, and I want to thank everyone who participated in that. I want to thank you. I still think of you as a student, because you were in those days, for managing so brilliantly. And it takes me back to see you so poised today.
Middle age will do that to
Yes,
you.
I think it's been a while. Yeah, and I also want to say that in the course of time, identifying editors for this project was extremely important. And Kumkum, who I am so sorry is not here, was an extraordinary person to participate in this enterprise early on because of her background. And it was very important for this to be transnational. In this country, we are so often mired in what we do within the confines of our borders, not acknowledging the extraordinary work and worth taking place all around the world. And that this was all about making that statement meant a lot to everybody who participated. And then along comes Paula. And Paula is, don't worry, Paula, but when I came to Smith, I thought about, as I always did wherever I went, I always wanted, with faculty appointments, to make a point. And after my experience at Princeton, when I brought Toni Morrison to Princeton, that was enlightening to me, because everything about that appointment said she should not be there. She should not be there because she didn't have a PhD. She should not be there because her work was, I don't know, did it measure up to Princeton? She should not be there for a host of reasons, okay? And from the time I entered the academy, that's always irked me about the academy. The failure to recognize the validity and the brilliance of so many people, where it seemed perfectly obvious to me that it should be recognized. So when I went to the English department at Princeton and talked about Toni coming to Princeton, they said, well, they couldn't possibly give her an appointment because, she didn't have a PhD. And yes, it's true, they held seminars on her work. I know. But they couldn't give her an appointment. And it's things like this about the academy that just drove me crazy, as you might imagine. And so we got Toni Morrison to Princeton, and of course, as you know, she won the Pulitzer, the Nobel Prize, and today, if you mention that embarrass, that embarrassment to Princeton, they'll deny it ever happened. Because you see today, there's a Toni Morrison Hall on that campus, and every so much that they derive from association with her art is so obvious to them, and they're very proud of that. Well, from that experience, I thought, I've got to get Paula to Smith. So Paula was my next project. And Paula is difficult because Paula, she has her own thing. I mean, she moves about the world with her own idea of, what's important and what's not important and so forth. And that can be sometimes difficult to figure out. But anyway, so she had been at Duke, she had served some time at Princeton, but I said, no, Paula, your work deserves a senior tenured faculty position at Smith, and that's what we want to do. So she came to Smith, took some doing, but she came to Smith, and then, of course, you see what she has done with the journal Meridians. I'm going to, I know you're just thinking, when is she going to finish? But here's the thing, when I came to Smith, I kept thinking, well, gee, a women's college. There are things we can do that others dare not do because they're not smart enough. They're not aware of what's going on enough. And so, but we can do it. We can do it. Okay? Because we know. We know. And so, so a couple of things that I started with. First of all, the Poetry Center was, desperate for some support. And the president of Princeton gave me funds to do whatever I wanted to do with when I joined Smith, and I gave it all to the Poetry Center. And I thought, yes, women poets, right? And then I thought, well, gee, why aren't we educating women engineers? And so I thought, okay, well, let's take that on because we have something to show. And what do we have to show? We could show that the system of orienting young people to technical careers and science and engineering was all wrong. It was a system built to eliminate people. But we could be the place that taught how to bring people in. And so I found a wonderful young man, Domenico Grasso, as you know, and asked him to come and to start the program. And he's today president of the University of Michigan. We can show people what can be done. And imagine someone who starts engineering at Smith and what they can do for that big old rambling place, Michigan. Imagine that, having somebody who gets it at the helm. So Meridians was easy for me, to get back to your question, because where else? Where else could it be done? Where else could it be protected from the kind of nonsense that prevailed in the academy? Nonsense like, yeah, but that person shouldn't get tenure because they're published in that place, okay? And that person is not good enough because we don't know what they're writing about. And they're not mainstream enough. This is all the junk that I heard when I was in the dean of the faculty office at Princeton. This is what I heard about people not fitting in and not being worthy of the academy. So we set out in everything that we did to demonstrate, and yes, shame, people who engaged in that kind of thinking. And the proof of it is the extraordinary work that people have done because they've been embraced, because they've been supported, because they have been recognized for the quality of their mind and the quality of their work. Sorry.
Thank you. I wonder if I could ask one quick follow-up, which is that as you look back now, 25 years later, does Meridian, its impact, what it shows and demonstrates to the world, does it match what you had hoped for when you originally greenlit the idea?
Well, just one problem. You said quick follow-up. I don't do quick follow-up. It is more exponentially than I could have hoped for. Because in those days, everything was in its infancy, and one didn't know whether we were on the right track or not, because we were doing things that others were not doing. And so we did it out of a conviction that it was the right thing to do. And sometimes people believe the right thing to do is not the profitable thing to do. And so we're lucky enough to have enough people who believed in the project and who had all of the ability needed to get it underway and to make it soar. And soar it did. So it is, yes, far more than I had imagined it could be, far better than I knew that it could be, far more important than I understood that it was. And I thought it was pretty darn important when we did it. But it's proven to be so much more than that. And I celebrated my 80th birthday this year, and when I look, okay.
You just have to take it.
Okay.
You just have to take it.
When I look back over my time in the Academy, there are a few things that I feel deeply emotional about, that I've been privileged to participate in. One is certainly coming to Smith and being a part of this extraordinary institution that is brave and that has the best students in the world, and that not only has the best students in the world, but has the students who have the courage to do what is necessary for the world. To be associated with that first. But among those things, certainly Meridians ranks up there as one of the things that I am so proud to have been associated with.
Thank you. It's Paula.
Oh, no.
I know. Unfortunately, you do. You joined the Smith faculty in fall 2001, which was, as we just noted, during President Simmons' tenure. And as a professor in fact, my dear colleague in Africana Studies, you became the third and to date longest running Meridians editor, stepping into that role in 2005 and staying as editor of Meridians until you retired, right? Yeah. In 2017. So it's my understanding that you had no previous experience editing a scholarly journal, much less one as unusual as Meridians. So my question for you is, what inspired you to take on that role of editor?
Thank you. Let me also say how wonderful it is to be in this room and to have this feeling that is in this room, and of just such great achievement of so many people who are here, and not only achievement, but just commitment and passion. And, when you listen to Ruth speak, that vision just carried us through. That vision she has, and that sense that she has, that you just heard, just carried us through some very, very difficult times at Meridians. And a commitment of the early people, people like Nancy, who just stuck with it and who was just so, and had her own vision as well, and worked so hard through good times and bad times, right, Nancy, to make sure that Meridian lived and thrived. And I must say, you know, a lot of people say, I know so many people who have experienced being involved with something like a big project, an important project like Meridians, and then their successor just sort of lets it go or just lets it fly. But I'm telling you, Ginetta Candelario has just made this journal just rise and thrive into new levels. And she's one reason I can sleep at night, because, Meridians is in such fine hands, and you can see this. Your question. You know, actually, I've been an editor longer than I've been a published writer. I was an editor of my high school journal. I was the editor of the Howard University's literary journal. I was the editor at Howard University Press. I was an editor at Random House. I worked in magazines in editorial capacity, not editor-in-chief, but in editorial capacities at Essence and Encore magazine in New York. And I love editing, right? And so, no, true that I'd never edited a scholarly journal, but I had been inspired by scholarly journals such as Sage, published at Spelman College, and the founder of Sage is here. That was just so important, and again inspiring, and again creates a framework for a journal like Meridians. And so the idea of Meridians, to think about editing a journal like Meridians, was just so extraordinary. You know, the young students here, they think about intersection. Oh, we all know about that. Oh, you know, we understand this. We understand transnational. We understand all that. It's second nature to you now. But at that moment, when Meridians was conceived by people like Nancy and that first collective, this intersection was an extraordinary idea, and one which had not yet completely migrated out of law scholarship. That's where it begins in legal scholarship, but not so much in other scholarship. So this was brand new. And what you can see so quickly is the power of that idea of gender, race, transnationalism, to create not only community here in the US, but this global community of people all over the world who can come into one center, intellectual center, and it's just extraordinary. And particularly the transnational aspect has really also been, Ginetta has done also so much with that aspect of it as well in a very important way. So it was a very exciting thing. Two things got me to Smith. One was Ruth, number one. And the second was Meridians. I said, what kind of a school that publishes Meridians? That's where I need to be. So it was a very exciting and a very exciting moment and years in my life and in my career here at Smith, and a real privilege to be an editor.
I have a follow-up for you, too, because I feel like you're being overly modest. And you've remarked on Ruth's vision and Ginetta's as well. And I think you're kind of gesturing towards your own, like what motivates and drives your own work when you talk about intersection and intersectionality. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about the ways in which your own vision for the journal evolved over your tenure, and how you know, the mark that you left, because we know that you did. Those of us who know that this journal. We'd love to hear that, so.
When I became editor of Meridians, I had published a Black women's history called When and Where I Enter. And the idea, and of course, when you're talking about women of color and African American women's history, I mean, intersection is an inherent part of it. But before there was a language for it, and before there was a structure that you could articulate about it, it became very different. You know, you all, most of you are too young to remember this, but are you a woman or are you Black? Right? And this was a very difficult question at some period, right? Because you were betraying something all the time. Where you, there's no right answer to that, right? And so I think I hope to maybe to bring up a little bit there to Meridians is this, the power of that idea of bringing together an understanding in ways that were just with African American women, but with women from all over the world, in bringing those ideas of those intersecting identities, and not just it starts off with also intersecting oppressions, but there's also the other side of it, of intersecting joys and intersecting power to it, and a lot of that comes out of a sense of community. So, and it's a global community. So, I thought maybe I brought some of that to. But I also just, I tell you, I remember just trying to survive a lot. We had a lot of these of just keeping it going and keeping it's just a tremendous, as those involved know, and Ginetta knows, it's a tremendous responsibility. You know, lives depend on these things. It's not just an academic exercise. And people depending on you, and they're reading themselves. They see themselves in this work, and they see their power in this work. And you have to keep that up, and you have to keep that quality up. And sometimes it means making difficult decisions. But I think once you feel like you have fulfilled that, then you have fulfilled why you are on this earth to do it.
Thank you. Ginetta, you're on the hot seat now. You have been involved with Meridian since its inception. You were published in Volume 1, Number 1, and subsequently accepted the invitation to join the Editorial Advisory Board, in which capacity you participated in the search process for the first editor, Kumkumba Vani, the second editor, Miriam Chansey, and Paula Giddings. You also participated in previous Meridians conferences, undertook peer reviewing. So even though I imagine these experiences were helpful when you succeeded Paula upon her retirement, you too had never edited a scholarly journal before. Thus, my first question for you is, what inspired you to take on the role of editor?
Paula said I had to. And what Paula says, one does, right?
Thank you.
No, all joking aside, yes, I was completely unprepared for the ask that I step into that role, because it wasn't an aspiration that I had at all. I really had never imagined doing editorial work of any kind, much less editing a journal with this history, right, and this legacy, which I was well versed with. And it did feel like a tremendous responsibility to assume assume that role because I didn't know what I was doing, literally, right? But what I did know was that the work was valuable and important. And to something that Paula just said about, lives depend on it. It sounds like hyperbole unless you've been in a tenure track position in the United States, right? Where the guiding principle still is publish or perish. That's the lives depend on it part. And the process of journal editing and publishing journal articles is a years-long process, right? As I think most people in this room know, from not only in terms of producing the thing, writing the thing, right? That takes such a long time. And, the whole educational trajectory, the research process involved, et cetera, right? So that's already years of life force and life energy and really family and communities, right? Because none of this, even though often we find ourselves alone in a room or in front of a computer or back in the day, typewriters or whatever, we're really not alone, right? We are the manifestation of collectivities, our families, our neighborhoods, our communities, our graduate school cohorts, et cetera. So it's years, right, to just get to the point where you write the thing, finally. And then you send it out into the world, and it's more years of time, right? Because it has to be peer-reviewed. It has to go out and be read by other scholars who have the capacity to give you some feedback on this, and that will take many, many months at its best, right? Especially, if a journal is functioning really well, but when there are issues of various kinds, which is often the case, it can take even longer. And then you get the thing back, and there's inevitably I've now learned that 80 to 85% is revise and resubmit, right? Not even the most senior seasoned scholars will get an accept as is. It's like a unicorn, right? Maybe accept with revisions. It's just part of the process. But it's also what makes the process so wonderful and incredible, if you can believe that, right? And then it comes back again, you work on it some more, you send it back again, and by the time it's all said and done, if you're lucky and you get to see it in print, 2 years have passed, right? But you get 6 years on the tenure clock, right? You get hired and you have 6 years to show your institution that you are meritorious, you deserve to be admitted into the academy with tenure. And tenure is critically important and historically has been because the linchpin of tenure is academic freedom. It is what is supposed to endow us with the capacity to explore and share sometimes unpopular ideas, right? In addition to innovative research, new methodologies, et cetera. So I realized when I stepped into the role, this enormous responsibility that Paula was talking about, that it wasn't just about, reading the work or identifying peer reviewers, but about being always conscious of what was at stake for the person who sends their work to us, right? And how to create a sense of responsibility also in the peer reviewers that we have, and in ourselves to do our best to shepherd the work. So when I understood that, and I have to say, Paula did a lot of work talking to me about it and explaining what the process meant, how to go about it, why it was worth doing. I said yes, and it's a 3-year appointment initially, and I thought, okay, I'll try it for 3 years. If I fail miserably, I'll just slink away quietly back to my office, and people will forget eventually, right? But once I was in, I got hooked, and I found that I loved the process. And here's something that no one told me. We don't have graduate students at the college part of Smith. There are graduate students in the School for Social Work, but not in our corner of the college. And we are scholar educators. Many of us are deeply invested in our fields, but we don't get the kind of dynamism that having graduate students give you. As editor, I have gotten to read work that I would never have otherwise necessarily read. Literally from across the world, from across disciplines, from across career moments. And it has been an incredibly enriching experience for me. it actually in some ways is humbling, because it's what we all know, that the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know, right? And that experience of being humbled over and over again and being awed by the work that I get to read is really what keeps me doing this work, and just feeling a deep investment in making sure that everyone knows about this journal. Because it's not just a journal, it's a community. My colleagues from Feminist Africa use the language of collective, and they talk about that project as a feminist project that, yes, is anchored in a journal, but is so much more. And I realized that we use similar language because I call it the Meridians Project for that reason, right? Every one of these issues is lives, right? Is life force, life energy, it's someone's work. And I don't ever want that to sit dead on a shelf. I want you to go and read it and pick it up and teach it and cite it, because that is someone's work, that is a community, that is a people, that is everything, right? And what could be better than that? It really is.
See, that's the thing. I know you're not asking me a question, but see, this is the thing that the young people here have to understand.
Yeah.
That Meridians touches people's lives in extraordinary ways and elevates them to a point where they can do so much more than they ever anticipated they might be able to do. This is person here, I don't know who she is, because she was not the same when I knew her here, okay?
That's what Nancy says too, actually.
Yeah, so for those who may be discouraged, particularly in the current environment, about doing work of this relevance, think of the people associated with Meridians and what they have accomplished. Kum Kum went on to be a leader in the University of California system. Paula is running the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. Yes, running the Academy of, and that's a, we always think of this work as, somehow on the back burner, or, an also kind of thing. But these are people who are in the dead center of what we do in the Academy. And they are leading, and they are showing people. And this is the thing to remember. Don't ever be reluctant to take on this kind of work, because it gives you something so solid that you can face up to people and do things that otherwise you might not be able to do. And I'm so grateful to Smith, because people often say to me, "But how did you do that when you were at Brown or when you were someplace else?" And I have to remind them that I became a person imbued with the notion that I mattered enough and knew enough to tell other people what they should do. Okay? And nobody could convince me that I was wrong. So these young people who were greeting us, I want you to know that that awaits you, because you are learning to be, not to apologize for what you are, not to do something over here out of the way, but to be dead center, letting people know what the world ought to be. And that's the benefit of this journal, is that it helps all those people associated with take on and rule that space.
Mm-hmm.
So, President Sarah, as you know, before becoming Provost, I was a member of both the Meridians Editorial Advisory Board and its Creative Writing Advisory Board. And so I was there when Ginetta reported that on her first interaction with you in the summer of 2023, following the announcement of your appointment as Smith College's 12th president, she met you and told you about Meridians. And this is how she tells the story. She attended a reception on Chapin Lawn where she introduced herself to you as both a faculty member in your shared discipline of sociology, never loses an opportunity to cheer on the sociologists. And then as the editor of Meridians. And she informed you that the journal was based at Smith, to which you responded, "Meridians? I didn't know Meridians lived at Smith. I love Meridians." And it has been clear since that moment that your appreciation for the journal and its mission is conveyed with that same enthusiasm, as has your appreciation for the fact that it is a quintessential Smith project with global impact. So I'd like to ask you, what is there to love about Meridians, and in particular about Meridians at Smith?
Thank you. First of all, I'm getting a lot of ideas about what I might do during my tenure here from my previous president. Daphne gave me a heads up that she might ask me this question, and there were so many things that I loved about Meridians that I decided I was going to write them down so that I didn't forget any of them. That's such a great question. What is there to love about Meridians? I think, first of all, the importance of the project's mission, advancing and showcasing the knowledge production of feminist women of color in scholarship, artistic work, and feminism. How the project has contributed to the growth of intersectional scholarship and activism. I think for lots of people, the idea of intersectionality is now a couple of decades old, but for many, many people, it's a brand new idea to be thinking about what it means to have multiple aspects to our identities and what those mean for us in terms of our lived experiences. The mentorship, the professional development, the community it's fostered across disciplines in the United States and globally. And I would say personally, the searing and searching essays and poetry, the evidence-based scholarship, the radically inclusive vision advanced in its pages has offered me, and I know many, many others, a trenchant intervention and an antidote to the domestic chaos and the global upheaval under which so much of the planet's people live and have lived, not just in this moment, but have lived over time, and with which Meridians contributors have always engaged. The deep collaborations Meridians has nurtured are particularly important to our community, women of color at Smith in the US, around the world, and people watching women of color who don't identify as women of color, but who benefit from the work in the journal and seeing the collaborative work that we're doing, right? It's a model for others. For Meridians authors, perhaps particularly those who are also Smith alums, it's come to my attention that Meridians is more than a journal. It is also a home, right? A home away from home, a space of mutual support. Having Meridians here at Smith, I think helps make the world both larger and smaller simultaneously for our students. And by that, I mean Meridians gives Smith students a perspective that they wouldn't otherwise have, right? So it's here and it's local, but it's also global. I was noticing last night as I was meeting some new friends at the dinner yesterday evening, how many people I was meeting for the first time who embraced me before introducing themselves, right? They didn't introduce themselves first. They embraced me and then introduced themselves. Can you imagine what the world would be like if that were our approach, that we are just assuming a level of love that is like a sibling? The best sibling, I would say. Good, healthy sibling relationship. But I mean, a familial level of acceptance, right? Even before knowing somebody's name, or where they went to college, or where they went to graduate school. That's a kind of radical acceptance that is both in the journal and of the journal, and yet it's a journal with high standards. So what does it mean to be a journal that is both elite but not elitist? Because the scholarship is rigorously vetted, right? The contributions are seriously undertaken, and suddenly it opens for us like an oyster. It opens the world to us. And that combination of being held up high as an example of the very best while also being open is far too unusual, but something about which we should feel really good and very proud. So I think my final comment is that I'm very grateful and very honored to come to a place where Meridians is its home. And Ginetta's right. I thought, I've been reading Meridians for the past 20 years, and I didn't realize its connection with Smith, and suddenly I was just kind of feeling a little bit better. Because it is dramatically unusual to have an international, first-rate journal published at a small liberal arts college. And so we hope two things happen, right? People really appreciate the stature of Meridians, but Meridians reflects back on the stature of Smith, and people begin to put together that there are some really extraordinary things that can come out of small places. Thanks.
So I wonder if I might ask you a follow-up. And in that, I think about the risk that President Simmons took on doing something innovative, in taking up that call, that proposal to support the founding of Meridians. And so as we look, where we are today and what we can be in the future, if you have some thoughts about your own vision for how Meridians can continue to be distinctive or even pioneering in today's scholarly landscape, publishing landscape.
Well, I'm not going to give advice to Meridians, to its editor or its editorial board. I would say to keep following the path. There were some really interesting work, particularly in Black women's scholarship, that really emerged out of the late 1960s and into the 70s and into the 80s. And that whole area grew over time. And many different women of color began having spaces for their scholarship. And I think lots of groups of color did. And there was gender studies, and class analysis became part of that, right? With each few years, there was more inclusion. And that wasn't about including people to make folks feel good. It was about including people in order to accurately represent the world that we live in. Because the previous scholarship that had been so dramatically exclusive was also not good scholarship, right? Scholarship cannot be good if it is not actually representing the world that we live in. And I think as Meridians continues to think about what does it mean to be transglobal, we might find that we have first contact with people from outer space, and then Meridians is going to have to think about what it means not just to be transglobal, but what it means to be interplanetary.
On it.
I think we're going to have to already, right? understanding and idea of what it means to be a woman has become more capacious. And for most of us, that is not threatening. Right? The idea of what it means to be an intellectual and a scholar has become more capacious, in part because of leaders like Ruth Simmons, who would bring Toni Morrison to Princeton without a PhD, but clearly a dramatic intellect, right? So I think what we keep doing is not pushing the envelope, but inviting people to understand that knowledge and wisdom and identity are always expanding, always under discussion, always negotiated, and to be fearless about where that brings us. So I think Meridians has been doing that, and as long as it keeps doing that, it will keep being among the most relevant journals that's on the planet. Hearing a little bit from Ginetta last night about her desire to ensure that Meridians is published in multiple languages. Because we know that English may be the dominant language for all kinds of reasons in the world, but it is not the only way of thinking, expressing, and we miss so much when we don't figure out how to listen to each other in our own languages. Some of the most important work that we do as humans is translating ourselves to each other and translating others to others. If we were able to do that, we would not be killing each other the way we are now. So that's another way to think about Meridians in terms of its life and death importance, that if we have a journal that is helping people understand more about folks all over the world, then we have a journal that's actually helping to sow the seeds of mutual understanding. Maybe one tiny journal coming out of one tiny college, but the possibilities are truly extraordinary.
Daphne, I'm going to go off script and jump in if I may. I want to thank President Sarah for that. But I'm also going to turn the moderator tables on Daphne, because she did mention that in her previous life, before being a provost, she served as a member of the Editorial Advisory Board and the Creative Writing Advisory Board, because that gives me an opportunity to thank you publicly for your invaluable service and contributions in that capacity. And as I said, to turn the tables and ask you a question. Part of your work as a member of both of those boards involved selecting the winners of the 2 awards that Meridians bestows every year: the Paula J. Giddings Best Article Award that I established to honor my predecessor, which is given to a contributor of the previous year's volume and selected by the Editorial Advisory Board, because we deem it emblematic of the Meridians mission, as well as you have helped to select the Elizabeth Alexander Creative Writing Award winners for at least 5-6 years, which is an open call-based award for submissions of poetry, prose, one-act plays, etc., which is actually open right now. Another plug. Okay, so here's my question for you, Professor and Provost Daphne Lamothe. How did engaging with Meridian's content in those capacities inform your own research, scholarship, and teaching before you stepped into this role?
I said I was going to put you on the hot seat, and you decided you'd return the favor. So I'll start by saying a couple of things, because so many of the things that you all said just really resonate for me as somebody whose history with Meridians is deep, not as long and deep as most of you, but still very profound and longstanding. And that is that serving on both of those editorial boards for me were some of the most thrilling, like vivacious, dynamic, like meetings and conversations. So when we talk about the power of collectivity and the power of working on and through difficult questions and issues to strive towards a common goal, I experienced that as a member of the board, and it's something that I treasure. It is a model of how to be in the world. So that's one thing. And then I want to answer your question both from the standpoint of a scholar and someone who's as an administrator, because I've been thinking a lot again as you've been speaking, all four of you. So as a scholar of literature and culture, Black literature and culture, across the diaspora, primarily in the US and the Caribbean. My work has almost always centered on place, space, belonging, and migration. And it has always centered the ideas, the intellectual contributions, the voices, the cultural contributions, and the perspectives of Black people. And so when I think about Meridians, this journal, right, and it's Ginetta who pointed this out to me once, feminism, race, transnationalism, not feminism, race, and transnationalism, right? It's not additive, but these three components coexisting. This journal really exemplifies a kind of development of a field and an approach that developed in tandem with my own work. I graduated and earned my PhD in 1997. So what is that, 4 years before the founding of Meridians? And so Meridians was both a resource for me, right? I read the articles, I learned from the writings in it, and it also evolved and developed kind of commensurate alongside of me in my own thinking. And so I found myself in preparing for this panel, and then as I was reflecting and listening deeply to what it means to center multidisciplinary work that centers transnational women of color and their ideas and their perspectives and their histories. And what happens, right? What's centered is, let's focus on the transnational for a moment, right? That we're talking about movement, we're talking about the crossing of borders, about connections and disconnections and translation. Multidisciplinary, right, is that we ask different questions depending on our disciplinary standpoint. And we find our way to different answers or solutions based on those different disciplines. So we're always shifting perspectives and understanding, not assuming that what you know or what you've experienced is the thing or the way to be, not taking that for granted and having to be open, right, to different ways of asking questions, of working through issues, all in the service of this shared kind of, the thing that undergirds all of this, which is to build a better future, to imagine better worlds. And so that's been central to my work. And it's just, I did not plan this. It is central to Meridians. And I think it is because it is a journal that moves, that is motivated by, that is inspired by this idea that that multiplicity and that movement and that way of being and being in the world, that relational idea, is fundamental, right, to a feminist project that centers transnational women of color. And then answering that question from the more Provostial perspective, I think about the fact that I'm sitting next to 4 institution builders. And some of the yeah. And what does it mean to take an idea and create something that becomes that has the power and the force and the staying power of an institution? And so, in short, I got a little taste of what it takes as a member of the editorial board, even as I'm sitting here in awe, listening to you all talk about the creation, the construction of this, and the sustenance of this institution that is Meridians. So this is what I heard. It takes a sense of responsibility. We're in a place of privilege wherever we stand, and we have a responsibility to use it. It takes hard work, sometimes not even knowing if there'll be a payoff for that hard work, but a commitment. It takes imagination to say, there might be a different way of doing this. I have something to contribute, to offer. So that's the other part. It takes a willingness to take risks, the risk to put yourself out there. And then the last piece that I heard, the theme was that it can be full of joy, even when it is hard to do that work. And so I want to thank all of you for it was the refrain that I heard in almost every one of your remarks. And it reflected back to me what I've experienced in different ways and in smaller ways, but in equally profound ways.
I think we can maybe open it up to questions.
Yes,
So I don't know if there are any questions.
I hope there are.
Yeah. Could you please stand up and say your name for folks who don't know, even though I know and love who you are?
Okay, thank you. This is Lamothe, and it's such a humbling experience to be sharing the room with so many inspiring, persons. You are trailblazers, and you, made the path for some of us to be here. So I have a comment and a question. So the comment is that Ginetta is the ambassador for Meridians, because I first met her in person in 2023 in Abu Dhabi as part of the global colorism, the global perspective. And then when we met during lunch, and then we introduced, she said, "Oh, you're Lamothe. We have your interview, and it's going to come out. Don't worry." The enthusiasm, the warmth, and of course the brilliance was unlike anything that I've seen from an editor. And I'm part of various editorial boards, but that was very unnerving in a wonderful way. So that's one. The question was that the interview was supposed to come out in 2022, but it didn't fit into that specific issue. So she asked, "Would you be okay staying with Meridians?" And we said yes, because of the journal's structure. We could have taken it elsewhere, but we decided to wait from 2022 to now, just to testify to how much respect I have for the journal. I just wanted to share that experience. So the question is, how were you able to navigate the global reach, and also the challenges that one experiences in terms of submission from other places around the world, in upholding the quality, the standard, because we heard those terms multiple times. How do we uphold? We come originally from West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire. Well, writing in English and other languages is sometimes difficult. How do you uphold those standards for a journal while trying to be equitable and open? Can you share more of those challenges?
Yes. Thank you, Lamothe, for that question. It's a really important one. And I just do want to point out that I'm so glad you waited, because that interview is in this issue for the 25th anniversary of Meridian. So, I'm truly grateful. So everybody in this room knows that the gold standard for journal prestige and peer review is the double anonymized peer review, right? And this idea of peer review. So one of the first things that I grappled with, precisely because of what you're signaling, that Meridians is a project whose core ethos is mentoring and supporting, right? But also the reality of the publish or perish fact, and the fact that most of higher education is historically white supremacist, masculinist, conservative, traditionalist, et cetera, and not inclined, as President Simmons pointed out, to value, right, the kind of work that we value. So how to do both, and do both the gold standard peer review so that it would be unimpeachable, even in those institutions, right, as our authors went up for tenure and promotion and so forth, but still did what we need and want to do. And the key was, who is the peer? What counts as a peer? Who knows what you are talking about, right? And finding that one other person who knows why Dominican beauty shops matter, okay, for example, or who understands why this reading of this particular text matters, right? Or this history that has not yet been told about Ida B. Wells, why that matters. And they know what you're talking about, right? And the more we do that, the more we grow that peer base, right? Which is community. That's really, in its truest iteration, what that should mean, right? It's your collaborator. It's the person who gets you, right? Not the person who's out to get you, which is too long and still today what the approach is of peer reviewing in most journals, right? It's the out to get you review. Never mind reviewer 2. Reviewer 1 and reviewer 3 are also awful, right? And that is, quite frankly, I think one of the things that makes Meridians historically and still today, I hope, different, is that our reviewers, and everybody in this room, if you haven't reviewed yet, you will, understand, again, what I was saying before, that this is someone's, heart, blood, and soul has gone into this. And the work is to lift it up. And actually, I was telling Lucy El Sharif, who's here with us tonight, who's going to be presenting tomorrow, who's also in volume 25, that I end my intro with a quote from her piece that is itself is a quote from an Indigenous Canadian scholar who asked her the question that she asks in her piece, and then I asked, right? So think about this trajectory. That is, what do we want to lift up, right? What do we want to lift up with this work? That is what peer review is supposed to do, right? Is to help us lift each other up, to give each other good, serious, meaningful, rigorous feedback, because we serve no one by saying, oh, yes, that's great, when it's not, right? It actually takes real commitment to lovingly read something and lovingly give back the hard feedback that is gonna make it better, right? And so that is part of what we've been doing, and I think we're working to expand, is to bring in peer reviewers from across the world, really, because again, the other thing is, it turns out, I realized when I started learning more about Meridians and the role of editor, that our cornerstone strengths historically have always been Black feminist work. And this might surprise some of you, but if you know who the founding board, transnational board was, it won't. South Asian and particularly Indian feminist work, right? Like real strengths, which I think is exemplary of that kind of subaltern South-South connection. But I also wanted to make sure that when we are publishing work, say, by and about Indian feminists here in the United States, or by and about Latin America, the Caribbean, Singapore, Korea, Lebanon, Syria, et cetera, that intellectual feminist knowledge producers, often scholars, but not exclusively, right, are reading that work for us because we're talking about them over here, right? And they don't know that we're talking about them, but they should. And they have something to say that our authors need to hear so that the work can stand in that context too, right? And then by extension, Meridians becomes familiar, right? And then they send us their work also. And that is really what we want, to create this transnational global community of feminist knowledge producers, sharers, circulators, et cetera, and to inform one another's thinking, to grow one another's thinking, because we have nothing to lose and everything to gain from that, right? So that's why. And I hugged you because I'm a hugger, and Sarah knows that too, and all of these people know because I hug everybody. If I haven't hugged you yet, line up later. I'm happy to give you one. So, thank you for the question. Yes. Do you mind standing just a
2001, President Simmons' tenure. I had a question. This has been incredible. And we spoke a lot about depth because we were speaking about rigor and how to sort of increase the intensity of the rigor and the process. But I actually have a question about breadth because certainly in Black radical and African radical traditions, journals have been central to movement. So there's sort of been anchors for actually animating thinking that translates into action. And obviously, as you know, I'm a practitioner, which is why I write about praxis. And so I'm curious about that and what, but you all would envision as ways to further root Meridians in movement, and are there ways even those of us, again, who are kind of out in the world doing slightly different work but connected to the intellectual rigor and the politics that's being produced here, are there ways that we can also help that translation? So I'm just interested about that. How do we connect the work, not just to academic conversations, but also to movement, particularly in these times, because the visions and the analysis being proposed here is in a way the tincture, for a world in deep distress, is my belief. So if this is the medicine, how do we, socialize it and expand it to more people?
Yeah. Thank you. And I'm tempted, if Nancy will let me, to turn this to Nancy Supporta Sternbeck, because from the beginning, one of the features in Meridians is a section called In the Trenches, which was explicitly intended to highlight activist work, written by activists often, right? So both scholarship about activism, but also activists' own memoir, testimonio, thinking, or reports about what they are doing in the trenches, right, across the world. And again, that was an incredible innovation. Apart from sort of the focus and the intersectionality, by the way, always including creative work, poetry, memoir, short story, as well as work on creative work, was in the trenches, right? So is it all right, Nancy, if I turn that to you and ask you to say something about what inspired the editorial collective and the founders of the journal to include activist work?
Well, we felt at the time that we wanted Meridians to be different, that it was different. And the idea, actually I should be facing this way, I think, and the idea that work that was valuable didn't happen just in the academy and didn't happen just at the computer. It happened when people were out in the streets, and most of the important feminist work that was being done around the world was work that was activism. And so I just want to back up a bit because we've said all evening about talking about the global reach of Meridians, but when we first started it about, feminism, race, transnationalism, we thought, because it was originally a journal for women of color, by and about women of color, and for women of color. But then we said, but just in the United States? And that was a huge moment when we said, no, it can't just be in the United States. It has to be throughout the world. And the global march and reach of women around the world and what they were doing in their countries, in their communities, all of that was feminist work, even when some of those women refused to call it feminist and learned later that, yes, that was feminist work. And so we wanted to honor that. And to get back to the point of the creative part, we thought that there are other ways in which that expression could be materialized in the journal. And so that's when we thought, let's have a section on creative work, photography, visual art, and coming from a period myself, or a perspective myself, or from Latin American Latinx studies, I very much was trenched in the tradition of testimonio, where you gave your first person account, where you were speaking for your community, and felt it was really important that that kind of acknowledgement took place in the journal as well. So I hope that answers that question.
Could I just comment on that? That's a very dangerous space. I'm sure we all know that today. The activist space.
Yeah, just.
In the academy. And I loved this question because it recalled for me in a powerful way how inspiring I found that idea. And so I thought, well, of course, we should embrace that as a part of the academy. And so we started talking about the idea of activists' appointments at universities, which Gloria Steinem, by the way, tried to endow an activist in residence at Smith, and that was nixed.
But there's always hope.
But, and then I went on, but I harbored this thought, oh, what a wonderful thing that is. So I went to, when I got to Prairie View, I created the activist in residence position. And of course, would not have any involvement in choosing the activists, because I thought that was the responsibility of the people who did the program. And doggone it, the first person they had come was a woman who was a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. The state of Texas came down on our heads and demanded that the program cease. So if you wanted to hang out a sign and say to authoritarian figures, corrupt figures, here's a way to come at us, you would do it that way. You would do it that way. And so I now think that there's one impeachable space here for us, unimpeachable space, absolutely unimpeachable space, and that is we study things. So it has to be done in the context of our bedrock work and not be seen to advance a particular project, because that's when those authoritarian figures come down on you. What we've started to do now is reach out to communities and to give them advice and support to the extent possible to help them mobilize in the context of their work, but not to try to do it from the academy. And so that's, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on this because I think it's a very important point. So in this moment, we should not be pretending that lives are at stake. And here, I don't mean tenure. I mean actually people being beaten up or deported or killed, okay? When you have an authoritarian regime, that is what they travel in. So I don't think we should pretend at all. how serious this moment is. We also need to know that in social movements, we need activists and we need academics, right? We need people who are social workers to help us repair ourselves, and we need people who are social strategists. And we also need not to be turning on each other because we may be playing those individual roles. I should not be beating up on you because you're an activist and I'm an academic, and you should not be beating up on me because I am holding to this academic line where study is going to be the way that I do this work, right? And we get in a lot of trouble when we start turning on each other, but a social movement needs everybody. It needs people in government and policy, in the streets, doing the studies. It needs people helping people repair themselves. It needs people who do a variety of things. But we should also know that the potential costs and the risks are very high. But there are a lot of things we can do. I'm thinking about the numbers of people who are in this room who do not identify as women, who do not identify as people of color, but who also have been supporting Meridians. And I'm very grateful to you. And your allyship is absolutely crucial to us. So we need everybody, particularly in a moment when we are pushing back against authoritarianism and we are pushing for democracy. And it is tough and difficult work, and the stakes are high. But there are so many things you can do. And activism doesn't have to look like what we traditionally think of as activism. It can look like going to, protests and carrying signs, but it also can look like helping young people in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and Girls Clubs and Boys Clubs and at the YMCA and the YWCA and volunteering in your schools understand the Constitution and what democracy actually is. That's a tremendous pushback in a moment where people do not know basic civics. So there are all kinds of ways you can participate. But I really want to underline what President Simmons has said. We should not abdicate the extraordinary privilege and work that needs to be done in the academy to do evidence-based research, to do it well, to do it unimpeachably, because that will last the test of time. It will last the test of time, and people who are activists will rely on it to make their arguments, and nobody else but us can do that.
I'm going to echo that. 4 years ago, I guess it was supposed to be the 20th anniversary, but we did it in 2021 because of the pandemic, and we did it online virtually. One of the folks who spoke at that virtual gathering, in addition to President Simmons, was Angela Davis, who published in Meridians, in volume, I think 1 or 2, I can't remember exactly, but she and another Smith alum, Cassandra Shaler, published a piece about the abolitionist movement, the prison abolition movement. And I had the privilege of interviewing them for that event. And I asked them, looking at that piece now, 20 years on, what did they think? And Angela Davis, and you can go watch this, by the way, it's on our YouTube channel, our website, et cetera. Angela Davis said that having that archive of the piece that they published there, going back to read it was so useful to her as an activist as well as a scholar, because she and Cassandra both could track what in fact had changed since the moment when they produced that research and wrote that article and published it, that there had been outcomes to their efforts as both activists in the prison abolition movement, but also as scholars whose work it was to research, document, and disseminate that information, right? So it was that both and it was, for me, it was incredibly moving and inspirational that it can have that just effect, right? Archive, activist, academic, all at the same time, right?
It reminds me of, correct me if I'm wrong, Ginetta, it was Eastern European scholar, a piece of Eastern European scholar.
The first one who won.
From Bulgarian, I think. who tells the story in Meridians of Angela Davis coming to Eastern Europe and started a movement there. They heard her, they took, understood what she was talking about, and they started a women's movement there in Bulgaria that was spread all over Eastern Europe. So there's also just a literal, of documentation and understanding of what knowledge production can do, right? So, but I remember being very, very moved by that. Yes.
Yeah, she was the first Paula J. Giddings Award winner, so
Yes.
I'm glad that it was especially.
Wasn't going
Yeah,
to
no, I mean, because Paula presented the award and read the piece very carefully
Yeah.
to make sure that it merited the.
I think we have time, yes, for one more question. Yes.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be in your presence. This morning in our Feminist Africa Meridians collaboration meeting, which is again one of Ginetta's passionate initiatives, my colleague Sandra over there mentioned that one of the themes of her journal that she was editing, one particular theme happened to be play. And there was another colleague on Zoom, Dr. Perea, who had mentioned one of the themes had been violence. So it seems like one of the sort of ambient concerns, and both presidents had mentioned it, the idea of fear and safety and violence and latency. I was wondering, in view of the ludic nature of play, what brings you joy? Like, what is something that can mend? And so I'd like to hear, if possible, from everyone, what is something that keeps you going and that will help motivate all of us? Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. That's a great question.
We'll just go down the line.
Oh, why you want to start there?
Yeah,
We could just as easily start in the middle.
I'll go first, and I'll keep it short. So I published a book a couple of years ago on the Black aesthetic in the 21st century, and what became really clear to me, even the aesthetic, what brings me joy is Black art, culture, music, imagination in all the forms that it takes, and just entering the worlds, like real and imagined, of Black women, Black people, period. It just does. And so when I'm seeking repair, restoration, life, I look to art. And it feels collective, like I could be alone and I feel like I'm in community. And if I'm at a concert with a group of people, then I really feel the power of the collective. So.
It's lovely.
I think as you get older, fewer things give you joy, but the joy. But the joy is greater of those few things. I don't know what you all were thinking about, but that's. And so the things that bring me joy now, really, writing brings me joy, and friendship brings me joy, and being with people who you love and who you are enriched by, today I had lunch with Ruth and Beverly Sheftal. It was just a joyous moment, because they're two women who have changed my life in different ways, and made me a better person in different ways, and gave me opportunities in different ways. I like to say that Beverly Sheftal is the first person that gave me a job in the academy. Ruth Simmons, my gosh, Ruth Simmons put me on a path, really both at Princeton for that 1 year, but particularly at Smith, that's just transformed my life and given me the space and the resources to live a good life in these years, you know, and just the confidence, right, in someone. You know, she talked about Toni Morrison. I have a bachelor's degree from Howard University, and that did not stop Ruth from inviting me to Smith, and you know, the people who have confidence in you, those are the important people to you. The heck with everybody else, right? And so she has just shaped my life in particular ways, and so those two things I think give me joy.
Go ahead.
There's so many things that give me joy. I really hardly know where to start. But I was quite blessed as a child to grow up in poverty, and where my parents were sharecroppers in East Texas. And somehow that experience teaches you so much about life and the world and what is valuable. And I find joy in the fact that I never became a person who thought much of recognition, who thought much of wealth and other superfluous things. I grew up being a person, thanks to my parents and my mother in particular, just valuing human beings for who they are. And I decided when I was quite young, I think probably I was maybe in college at the time, that I would never live a life where I could say that all of my friends and acquaintances and all of my time was spent with people of a certain importance or a certain stratum. And I can say that my life today goes all the way from the poorest neighborhoods in Houston to the wealthiest neighborhoods in Houston. And so, you know, I went to a grand black tie ball at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston, where I'm a trustee. And when I go to something like that, people at my table have to be from every community, and never people who are,
the muckety mucks.
yeah. So my joy comes from pushing myself, testing myself constantly to see if I'm remaining true to that. Okay? And that's where I derive my greatest satisfaction, when somebody says to me that that's what I am. I don't get much satisfaction when people say, oh, well, you've been this and you've been that. No. When somebody in the community where I grew up says that I have done something meaningful to them, that gives me immense, immense joy, I have to say. I'll also say that when my students ask me, as they always have, I was telling Paula and Beverly earlier today about something that happened to me recently, where the students from Prairie View gave me a gift. And it was a poster that they had done of me in a superhero costume.
That's awesome.
That wasn't the important part. The important part was they had my name in the place of the S for the Superman, Ruth the Truth.
Love that.
What gives me joy is if people take me for what I am and believe that I'm authentically who I am. I work hard at that. And you can get joy from just doing the things that you promised when you were 5 years old or 10 years old or 15 years old that you were going to do. And the moment that I got on the Greyhound bus when I was 17 and declared that I would not be held down by the racism and the segregation of this nation, I got on a bus and decided I had to get away from it. And so I went to Mexico to live with a Mexican family for the summer. That person who did that at 17 is the person today still trying to make sure I'm reaching across every border and being a person of the world, not a person of my little community, not a person of my little profession, not a person who wears Lamothe shoes. I don't own a pair, by the way. But a person. That's the most important thing to me. And when I can tick that off, I feel immensely pleased.
Thank you. Okay, Ruth, this is President Sarah still thinking. Thank you for that question, Nancy. It's really a wonderful one to kind of wrap on. Gosh, I have to say the first thing that popped into my mind when you asked that question is that some years ago I was at Harvard because I got a fellowship to do some research, and I've been working for over 20 years on a book trying to tell the story of feminists and feminism in the Dominican Republic, which is my heritage, my maternal heritage country. And Harvard has the microfilm of the National Council of Negro Women. And one of the women I end my book on, which goes from 1880 to 1960, is a Dominican woman who was honored by the National Council of Negro Women in 1950. And I wanted to figure out, how did that come to pass, right? So I'm sitting in the bowels of a library at Harvard looking at microfilm. For the young people, this is before the internet. Microfilm is literally like these, strips of plastic on a little reel that you have to feed into a machine and then, right, and go slide by slide. There's no searching, right? You got to look at every single page. And I'd been in there that day, this, like on a Friday after a full week of many weeks of, being at this, microfilm machine. And all of a sudden, 8-10 hours into this, I realize I'm so happy right now. I love this. Okay. Like, I really am a nerd. Okay. And I'm doing exactly the right thing with my life because here I am, right? It was incredibly affirming, right? That like I picked the right path for myself, right? That I've always been a nerdy girl who loved to read and just think and read and write and debate and argue and learn more and more and find out and follow the things down the rabbit hole, right? And that spending 12 hours that day looking at the 1,000th page of the National Council of Women's meeting, just was incredibly fulfilling, right? Yeah. And relatedly, because the project is fulfilling, right? Because I've been able to work in a world where I can spend 20, now at this point, 30 years of my life trying to share what I have learned with others, right? Because that's the second thing I thought that gives me joy, is teaching. I really love it, and I love being in a place where that's the model, scholar, educator, right? That we get to be and do both. And I was telling a junior colleague here at Smith, we were talking about, she's a sociologist, and we were talking about how to teach intro and whatnot. And we're talking about how to teach theory, particularly sociological theory. And she said, that in graduate school, she learned it, it was fine, it wasn't so great, but really the person who made the difference for her was her undergraduate instructor. She's from Texas, by the way. And I said, did you ever tell him? And she said, what do you mean? I said, did you ever tell him that the way he taught you theory was life-changing for you? And by the way, this is a Black woman sociologist, right? And this was a white male instructor. And she said, no. I said, one of the things that has kept me going sometimes when I have felt like I just didn't have anything left in the tank for this work was that sudden email that I got from someone that I taught 40 years ago when I was in graduate school, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that writes to me, Dear Professor Candelario, I just wanted to tell you that the other day I was teaching this class or doing this work or whatever it was, and I remembered your class, and your class made a difference for me, and I thought I'd let you know. Those moments are life-sustaining, and they give me tremendous joy, right? Because they are about those seeds that we plant, and we don't know what's going to come of them. But being an educator is incredibly powerful in that way, because it does make a difference, And then, of course, the things that we all know are important are our beloveds, right? Our family, our friends. But also, I got to say, this room and last night's room. Last night, I got to stand at the front of this room, and it was the most beautiful thing I have seen in a very long time, and it was incredibly uplifting. So, thank you for the question.
I feel like that should be the final word, so I'll try to be very brief. I think joy is a byproduct, and it comes and lands on our doorstep unexpectedly. But it's really hard to plan for joy or to pursue joy. There are lots of things that give me deep pleasure, all kinds of art and music and spending time with friends. But joy is something really unexpected, and that I do think is a byproduct of things out of our control, and also the attitude with which we face life and bring to life. So there are so many experiences of joy, I couldn't even begin to describe them, but they're often so surprising to me. And I guess I would make that distinction between pleasure and joy. That student who writes after all those years, or somebody, I'll tell a very brief story. I need a lot of silence to kind of generate myself. And I love being with people, which is good in this job, but I need some times of deep silence in order to get up and keep going. And I was at an airport in Colorado, and I thought, I do not want to talk to anybody, so I'm going to find a seat. I'm going to look for somebody who doesn't look like they want to socialize. I sat down next to a young woman who seemed to be really intent on her phone. Bonus. And she leans over to me and is trying to communicate with me through Google Translate because she doesn't speak English. And I'm thinking, golly. And I also noticed that it seems like she's wearing a hospital bracelet. And we're having trouble communicating. And finally she calls somebody and asks them to speak with me. And the person on the other line says, hi, I'm so-and-so, you're sitting next to my wife. She's never flown on an airplane before. Could you just watch out for her? Maybe you can arrange your seat next to her. Maybe you can see if somebody on the plane speaks Spanish. I'm gonna meet her in Philadelphia. Okay. So I find out there's nobody, none of the flight attendants speak Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but we're all kind of watching out for her. And she and I begin to communicate more effectively. And I think I ask her where she's from. She says El Salvador. And I'm thinking, wait a second, how could you have never been on a plane before? So I said, so how did you get here from El Salvador? And she says, and she's been in a detention center for several days. And, but her husband sent her a plane ticket. She had ID. She was able to get on the plane. And so we have enough of a conversation. But the whole time now I'm thinking, how selfish that I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I'm worried about her the whole flight. She's never been on a plane, so she didn't actually know there was a restroom on the plane. We get off the plane. I go down to baggage claim, and I see her husband, but I'm without her, so I turn around to see if I can find her. And we pass each other while she leaves the restroom, and I go back looking for her. And the next day, she finds me on Facebook, and she and her husband thank me for reuniting them. I didn't do anything. But I had a moment of joy. It was just joy. I didn't do anything, right? But I suddenly realized what privilege I live my life with. And I was so grateful that they had been reunited. And it was a byproduct of the moment. It had nothing to do with anything. But how lucky for me to be a witness to this. And I think being open to those moments, right? That's joy. And they're all around us all the time. And I would say, to Ginetta's point, yes, tonight is a moment of joy. And we can go and share those with others. And they won't be expecting it. And we'll get them anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks to all of you.
Could I just end with one thing? I'm very much aware of how perilous these times are and how many of us are receiving the dangers that we see. But one great advantage of having lived so long is that you know that you've seen worse. And you know that things change.
That's right.
And so for the young people, I always say to my students, wherever we are at this moment, prepare yourself as if you know that this will change and you need to be ready for the time that comes. And that's the way I survived as a young person when so many people were being assassinated, when I had no right to my voice, when I had no aspirations as a woman, and so forth. At that moment, I didn't think there was a future for me because everything said there was not a future for me. But what I did was prepare myself for what I thought I should be in the event that there came a time when I could be everything that I needed to be. And that's what we've got to do in this moment. We've got to fight like hell against everything that poisons the world that we're in, and at the same time, not forget that this is going to end one day, and we need to be ready for that moment. So thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Very much appreciated. And again, I invite you to attend the symposium tomorrow, which opens at 9:45 in the browsing room at Nielsen Library. Thank you again.